In this special episode, I'm taking a walk into the wild, at home, here on the Mapperton Estate in Dorset.
We have a particular objective here, which is to create what's called wood pasture, which is a mix of pasture, i.e. areas where large herbivores can come and graze, alongside individual trees, in particular oak trees.
Nature restoration is something which is vital to all our futures. The historic houses that I visit across the UK are exploring ways of helping heal the landscape in their care and allowing nature to thrive.
This is a nice area where it kind of gives a sense of those kind of the richness of that biodiversity that we have, and kind of an indication of how we want to kind of start to extend that onwards
To extend it on, yes. When I married into the British aristocracy, it was the start of a wonderfully exciting journey. But it was also a little daunting. I became a viscountess, and for an American girl from a small town outside Chicago, that was quite a shock.
I live with my husband Luke, heir to the Earl of Sandwich, and our family at Mapperton House in Dorset.
Living in a place like this is a joy, but also a challenge. And every day we're aware that we're preserving a very special part of Britain's heritage. Mapperton has opened up an extraordinary new world for me, and I can't wait to share it with you all.
So if you love castles and manors and stately homes as much as I do, please join this American Viscountess as I journey into the British countryside in search of some of Britain's finest historic houses. Here at Mapperton, nurturing this beautiful Dorset landscape is at the heart of everything we do. Out on the estate, on a cold winter's day, my husband Luke explained more.
Well, I've dressed the part because it's really cold today.
It's freezing. I don't have any gloves and my hands are already going numb.
Well, I've got fingerless gloves, and this is a snood. It's like a scarf and a hood all in one. It works.
Looks super warm.
Yeah, it is super warm. Super warm. But you know, I wanted to talk to you because, as you know, I travel around up and down the country visiting other historic houses, and you know, quite a few of them are starting rewilding projects. So they're looking at nature restoration, nature recovery, exactly what we're doing here at Mapperton. But can you explain to everybody out there a little bit more about what rewilding is?
Yes. Well, rewilding is something that has taken off in the last few years, following in particular the example of the Knepp estate in West Sussex, where what was once an intensive farm has been returned to nature. And what we're trying to do with rewilding is, first of all, the objective is nature recovery.
Yes.
You know, it's to get a good balance of species, of flora and fauna back into the countryside. Because for years and years, decades, a lot of the land around here has been very intensively farmed. And we've lost a lot of our species.
Yes, we have.
Since the Industrial Revolution, we've lost something like 50% of our plant and animal species, which is an astonishing number.
It is.
And we've got to find a way to bring them back. So rewilding is trying to do that. And it's trying to do that by getting to a point where nature takes control again, so that it's not humans intensively managing the land, it's natural processes that are taking over. But the key thing, and I think of rewilding as having two stages essentially, is that in the first stage we have to give it a helping hand. We can't just stop everything that we're doing.
And do you say give it a helping hand is because we were the hand that also sort of you know, got to the point where we've lost the biodiversity of so much of it, and so now we've got to help it out to get to the point that it can do its own thing.
Yes, it was our hand that has caused the problem in the first instance, and so it is hopefully our hand that is going to help restore nature as well. So in the restoration part of this, we've got to start with certain interventions to give it that helping hand. And those include things here at Mapperton like reintroduction of species. They include some tree planting. We've got some wildflower meadows going in. We've got ponds that we will be creating. All of these things are to help the habitat recover to the point where it can look after itself, to the point where we've got a balanced ecosystem and natural processes will just take over. But it's going to take us at least 10 years to get there. And in the meantime, there's a lot we have to do. One of the really interesting things looking at this landscape is just to imagine how it has changed over the last 100 years. And actually, because of our topography here in West Dorset, this has never been really intensively farmed. It's just too difficult. You've got all these little hills and combes, which are the valleys at the bottom, this very marshy land that you can see. And so, can you hear
I can hear the woodpecker.
You can hear the woodpecker in the background.
Amazing.
You can see all of this scrub along the edges here. Now, it probably was the case that on this little part of the field here, this might at some point have had crops in it.
Right.
This is what we call improved grassland. And from an ecological standpoint, it doesn't actually mean that it's been improved. It means it was improved for farming.
Right.
And for the most part, what that has ended up doing is providing a lot of grass for pasture.
Okay.
So you've only got a few different species here, dominated by what's called ryegrass, because it's such a good grass for feeding animals. But there's very little else going on here. So it's improved grassland for farming, but it's what we would think of as quite species poor grassland. So this is an example of an area that we want to encourage to come back. We want other plant species to come and establish themselves. And in particular, what we're looking for is for areas of scrub to develop. One of the key things that the scrub does, so you've got these patches of bramble around here, is that it provides protection. Well, it provides habitat, obviously, for nesting birds, but it also provides wonderful protection for young tree shoots. You know, if a tree was to establish itself here, it wouldn't have a chance.
No.
It would be munched almost immediately by the deer that we have here.
Exactly.
But if the tree establishes within one of these areas of scrub, it's got a chance of getting through. In fact, you can see, I think that might be a blackthorn over there. It's come up through the scrub because it's had a chance to establish itself because the deer can't get to it. So in this area, on this particular patch, what we need are the pigs to come and rootle up. The pigs are nature's plough. They get under the ground. They use their snouts to turn over the soil, and that opens it up so that plant species can establish themselves. But it also means that as it warms up, all of those bare earth areas become wonderful microhabitats for invertebrates, for insects, which of course then becomes food for the birds. It's worth saying at Mapperton that we have a particular objective here, which is to create what's called wood pasture, which is a mix of pasture, i.e. areas where large herbivores can come and graze, alongside individual trees, in particular oak trees. Now you can see we've got an absolutely wonderful English oak over there, also called the pedunculate oak, and but it's on its last legs. It's mostly dead.
Right.
But that tree just standing there is still a wonderful habitat for all sorts of creatures. And oaks are particularly important. They support over 2,000 different species of other plant and animal life, insects, lichens, other plants. Interestingly, when we look at this landscape and we think about oak trees, we're really thinking about the opportunity for the planting of acorns. And there's a particular bird species here, the jay. That's what it does. It picks up acorns and it goes and plants them. Squirrels do the same thing.
Yes.
And so these acorns are all undoubtedly planted around here, waiting to come through, but we've got to give them an environment in which they can thrive. Now, we're talking about, a multi-decade process here, so this isn't going to happen overnight.
No.
And in a way, we're going back to a landscape that we would have seen I don't know, something like 10,000 years ago. We're trying to recreate the flora and fauna of that period. And in order to do that, we've got to have herbivores. Herbivores are the key. Now, we all think of herbivores like cows that are out there making milk for us and steaks and all sorts of other lovely things. But they perform an absolutely essential function, which is to graze.
Exactly.
Because unless we graze, we aren't getting all of the benefit of regeneration. We can't simply allow the scrub to take over or the grass species to take over. These different plants are kept in check by the grazers. And so here at Mapperton, we have introduced white park cattle as our cattle species. Now, these are a wild native breed.
Beautiful.
We've introduced also ponies from Exmoor ponies. Now, they graze, but they also browse, which means that they are eating some of the scrub
Exactly.
and the ferns and really keeping back the growth of too much bramble. We've also obviously
Have
got
the pigs.
some pigs. These are Tamworth pigs. We've talked about how pigs are so important for the soil, and so we've got some of those roaming about as well. So the idea long term,
And we have beavers.
we do also have beavers. Beavers, incredibly important, creating wetland. At the moment they're in an enclosure because in this country they have to be
Yes.
kept in an enclosure. They're not allowed out in the wild. But with all of these herbivores, it means that we're starting to have the right balance, the right mix of animals to keep the balance between the vegetation and the animal species.
Right, which is how it used to be.
Which is
Before
how it used
we
to be, to
interfered.
create the optimal environment, the optimal
Exactly.
ecology for all of the other plants and species to thrive. This landscape looks pretty wild as it is. I mean, it is already a semi-rewilded environment. And particularly if you look in that direction where you've got all of these rushes and these marshy areas and all of the scrub. But then looking behind us this way, it isn't. So
No.
my hope over the next 10 years is that we start to see much more of a rebalance, of regeneration over here. It'd be lovely to spot a small oak sapling in the middle of the field here.
Right. So if the hope is to, again, see something different and more, I guess, thriving here in about a decade's time, how are you monitoring that progress?
So the key thing is to have what's called a baseline survey. So at the very beginning of the project, i.e. now, we're doing surveys to make sure that we know exactly what vegetation we've got. So we've been, in fact, our son Nestor has been helping with that. We've been going out making little quadrats, little squares, looking at every single plant species in that square, identifying the very precise GPS location so we can go back to exactly that square in future years and see what's changed.
Amazing.
On top of that, we're doing invertebrate surveys. We've got bird surveys going on. We've got soil surveys. We're really interested in the soil because in particular we want to monitor the levels of organic matter, the levels of carbon, see how that's changing over time, because these rewilding projects are fantastic opportunities to sequester carbon, to store carbon. Obviously the more vegetation you've got, the more you're taking out of the atmosphere. And so this data is a big part of what we are doing here, so that over time we can look back and actually say, gosh, we've got some really clear metrics that prove to us that we've improved biodiversity and carbon capture over a period.
Amazing. So you've talked about the herbivores, and I think many people probably want
Do
to
you say herbivore?
Yeah, we do say. I think we say
Wow.
in America herbivore.
Herbivore to me, but yeah. Maybe you say herbivore.
I'm sure.
It's definitely herb,
Well,
isn't it?
I mean,
That's a new one for us.
I'm sure that, because that would be my American
makes
coming
sense.
out.
Yeah.
There you go. I don't think we've ever had that conversation
haven't.
before. Anyway, can we go see the herbivores? Because I suspect that those watching will want to see the herbivores or the herbivores.
Yeah, the cattle, the ponies, the pigs.
Exactly.
Let's see if we can find a couple of them.
Okay, great.
Okay.
I think most people watching this program right now and who know me know that I do have a fear of cows.
These are very friendly cows. Look how calm
With
they are.
pointy horns.
Well, horns are pointy.
Yeah.
That is a truism.
Yeah, but they are rather beautiful.
They're absolutely stunning. These are our White Park cattle. We've got a herd of about 26, maybe a couple more this year. And these are doing what's called conservation grazing. What we're trying to do in a rewilded landscape is to have what's called low intensity grazing. If you've got lots and lots of cows, they're all going to be chewing up a huge amount of grass, and your idea is you want to fatten them up or you want them to produce as much milk as possible. Here, we haven't got the cattle doing that same job. We've got them here in order to manage the grass levels and the vegetation levels at a low intensity. So we've got many fewer cattle per square mile, per square kilometre than you would have on an intensive farm. So low intensity, not a huge number of them, but we also want them to do something else. And that is to look magnificent in the landscape. And the reason we want them to do that, which is one of the reasons we've chosen White Park, is because we want people to come and see them.
Yes.
And see just how spectacular they look here at Mapperton Wildlands. Because a big part of rewilding is about connecting people back with nature and with wild spaces. And we're starting to develop at Mapperton ecotourism, which means we have safaris.
And I love that. I do love that name, safari, because I think we've sort of been brainwashed in one sense that a safari can only happen if we go to, Africa or to India.
Yeah, who needs giraffes? Who needs lions when you've got stunning White Park?
Exactly.
There's only 1,000 of these cattle in the world, and it's therefore an incredibly rare species that you can watch on your doorstep, or fly over and come and see us in Mapperton instead of flying to Africa. Indeed, fly to the UK. This group here has been on the land for about 3 years now, so they've really made it their home, and they're out all year round. So you don't have to bring them in the winter because they're hardy. They don't grow as quickly as other more domesticated breeds of cattle.
Well, that's because they're feasting off of the land. They're not being...
They haven't been bred to be fast growing.
They're not being fed other
Exactly, they're not coming in and eating animal feed through the winter. So they're surviving on whatever's here, and they look incredibly content doing it.
They certainly do.
Now we have got other animals here, of course. We've obviously got the ponies, the Exmoor ponies, who are in the field behind us over here. And then on the top field, we've got the pigs, the Tamworth pigs.
My favourite.
Who are doing all of the rootling, and we've got some wonderful young piglets this year as well.
So sweet.
The idea eventually is that all of these animals come together and we take out all of the fencing. At the moment, at the start of this rewilding project, we're leaving the fencing in because it's easier for us to control where we want them at this stage. But once we've got enough succession in the landscape, once we've got enough regeneration going on, we will feel comfortable taking out all the gates, taking out all of the fences, and just letting the animals roam, going to the different areas that they want to go to.
Have a happy life.
Have a happy life. I think they've already got a pretty happy life.
They certainly do.
Across the UK, historic house owners are leading the way in ensuring the survival of the natural environment. I visited some beautiful landscapes where nature is being given a helping hand to regenerate. At glorious Elmore Court in Gloucestershire, Anselm Guise is in the process of giving land back to nature.
I mean, this land out here was historically had been very heavily drained, to try and make agricultural land. So what we've done is we've been breaking the land drains and letting the land hold the water. So this bit we're kind of returning it back to, what it used to be, which was a wetlands.
Which are wetlands, exactly.
And Elmore is called Elmore, we think, because it's Eelmore, more of eels, because back in the day there would have been. Because eels, I didn't realise this until quite recently, they made up more of our diet than all other fish combined in the medieval times.
Oh my goodness.
So this would have been like a hive of activity.
Yes,
eels
of course.
And all the rest of it. So And of course, the eel story is amazing as well, because what we're doing here is by improving eel populations, because of the fact they go to the Sargasso Sea, we're impacting on the biodiversity that's happening in the Caribbean Sea, which is, so there's this kind of amazing,
is incredible. This is
exciting link between,
Yes.
you know, doing one thing here can have an effect on something
And something
on the other
else.
side of the world, you know.
How brilliant.
So it's exciting to kind of, you start pulling these levers and you start realising
Yes.
the impact you're having.
Well,
is
and
actually-
exactly, and I think for many people, I mean, I know I was in the same boat before we started our rewilding project properly, that people think of rewilding as just sort of letting nature go and that's it.
Yeah.
And I get that, but also there's the wetlands.
I mean, we have done stuff.
Look
and
at
out here we've done wetland scrapes,
Yeah.
and we broke all the land drains, like I said, so the water doesn't run away. And then by putting a scrape, it kind of automatically get these ponds, and that's bringing in already loads of bird life. So we're doing that there, and then sort of over this way, which is slightly less low-lying. The idea is to allow that to become a semi-scrubby, 20% woodland cover thing,
Right.
but over a really long period of time.
All these projects are looking to the future for the long term. And in the Highlands of Scotland, on the stunning Blair Athol Estates, ancient woodland is being preserved and revived.
So Georgie, you've been here working with Athol Estate for some time now, is that right?
Yeah, the last 3-4 years or so we've been engaged with the estates.
And what's your role in this beautiful landscape here?
Yeah, so we came in to help the estate sort of take, shift their woodland management into a different phase. So at Athol, they have this really extraordinary history of forest management in Scotland, where they've really contributed to the development of forestry. Really since the 17th century, they were a place renowned for their forestry. And that's sort of going right back to some kind of quirky characters where one of the dukes was so intent on expanding the forest that he would spray seed across hillsides with cannons.
What? So he
really-
would literally shoot a cannon out that was filled with seed.
That's the story. That is the story.
Oh
yeah, so just finding these really innovative ways of expanding the forest at Athol.
Right.
So there's thousands of hectares now that are established, really quite diverse commercial woods at Athol, and a few hundred years ago they were bare hills.
Okay.
So they have this real tradition of transforming the landscape here, of really taking and changing the landscape through forestry, through new woodlands. And in the past that's been with this focus on commercial species of growing timber.
Right.
Now it's a slightly different shift, and
Yeah.
it's going more towards this ecological restoration.
Right.
So yeah, it's been a real change.
So it's how fascinating, and it's almost, I mean, if I don't mind, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think there is this real shift across the country in going back to this nature recovery, right?
Absolutely.
And farming same way, right?
Absolutely.
So nature recovery, regenerative farming.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, we're seeing that real shift across Scotland. Here at Athol, they're making that move. It's not to say they're moving entirely away from commercial forestry, it's still part of the picture. But there's-
trying to find the balance.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's why we're working in areas like this where we have these sort of remnants of native woodlands.
Yes.
With these sort of key species.
Where
that-
they're dotted around.
Mhm. And you can see where trees have been lost, and you have that retreating canopy cover. So the footprint of the forest has been shrinking over the years just through different land uses. And so this is about bringing that shift where we start to regenerate that land to allow these woodlands to regenerate and create more expansive areas of woodland habitat that link up and bring all these different benefits that we know
Right,
they do.
right, exactly. Biodiversity, all of that.
Absolutely.
So when I'm looking to my left here, and you can see these sort of native, these are native, right?
These are native trees.
You think, gosh, what can I do with this? Is that right?
Absolutely, yeah. So there's evidence of the way the land's been used, for lots of different reasons, but it's been grazed by sheep and
Right.
deer.
Yes,
and that's
yes.
part of the picture here, but it's just about trying to maybe shift that balance a bit now so that these woodlands are not lost entirely. I mean, what we see up this glen, up Glen Tilt, these remnants, I mean, they're probably the remnants of the first forest to come in post-glacial times, you know,
Right.
so the genetic continuity of maintaining the trees that we have now and avoiding losing them.
Yes.
You know, there's sort of that key genetic
Yes.
material
Yes,
that
yes, yes,
if
of
we lose
course.
it, it's gone.
It's
And-
gone.
And that's that whole, you know, sort of journey through from the glacial time.
Yes.
So,
Incredible, and it's about trying to preserve that.
absolutely, yeah.
And when I also look to my right, though, I can see sort of dotted around sort of bundles of logs. Is that you as well?
Yeah, this is quite a big piece of the picture that we're trying to shift in this glen. So this is the start of a really large scheme, a new planting scheme, a native woodland scheme.
Right.
So that's the first evidence of the fence line coming in, and that will be a deer fence. So we'll be excluding deer from quite a significant area
Yes.
for the first sort of 20, 30 years, really, to allow those trees to establish fully in that time.
Wonderful.
And I mean, for a scheme like this, it's we're talking about sort of 500 hectares or so in size.
Yes.
And sort of 400, 500,000 trees.
Yes, that's
Um,
incredible.
yeah.
Because as much as we love deer, they can be quite damaging to, again, new life.
Absolutely, that's it. They do naturally browse on these seedlings that are coming through, and they just, if where that happens repeatedly, those trees just won't quite
Right. Make
won't
it.
quite grow. Exactly, they won't make it. So it's just especially somewhere where we're establishing a lot of new seedlings. It's not just relying on the natural regeneration. There's areas where we don't have that seed source, so we come in, we plant seedlings, and we have to protect them.
And you have to protect them, right? So you're really helping and aiding in this recovery of nature.
Absolutely, that's what it's about. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, really trying to kickstart those natural processes again, bring the trees back into the landscape in these areas, and then all the benefits that they're associated with. Like, yeah, as you said, the biodiversity, really focusing in on the soils and how they
the soil-
develop.
yeah.
The water moving through
Yes.
the landscape.
Exactly.
I think it's really interesting here at Athol. You know, it is looking for a balance. Genuinely, it's not a full shift
Yes.
from the traditional land use to just full rewilding. It's somewhere where they're trying to find a balance between different land uses. You know, still have the farming, still have your stocking, but have your woodlands and
Right.
expand them as well within that wider picture.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you, Georgie. This is brilliant. Well, gosh, if I could come back here in about, what, 20 to 30 years,
you
and
see
I
a-
might
you see a
big
significant
change.
difference.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
absolutely.
When I visited Castle Howard in North Yorkshire, the spectacular ancestral seat of the Howard family, I met up with Guy Fallon, head of natural environment, to understand how the estate is being nurtured for the future.
So we're right on the edge of the North York Moors, and then we've got this ridge line here, an escarpment, limestone escarpment, which is the kind of foundation of the Howardian Hills. So we sit in an area of outstanding natural beauty.
Yes. The location is just idyllic. You know, you have this palace right here overlooking this incredible view of the landscape. How many acres in total?
In total, we're 3,500 hectares, so
Right,
9,000
1,000
acres. And about half of the land is arable, 30% is then woodland and
Right,
forest,
right.
and then about 10% is down to grass. So
Okay,
you've
okay.
got kind of quite a mixture, really. So.
Yeah, and are you looking at doing any type of rewilding on the estate?
Yeah, so currently we're looking at kind of all our options, really.
Yeah,
so land
yeah.
management is probably going through like some of the biggest change
Yes.
it's ever gone through, like since post-war, really. So people are looking at how do we manage our land, how do we start to reduce our impact on natural environment, and
Yep.
how do we start to get that land working to address those kind of big land management challenges like
Yes.
biodiversity loss, climate change, carbon sequestration, all these kind of
Yep.
things. So yeah, it's huge time, and there's so much opportunity to kind of look at how you change systems, change management plans, etc.
Yes,
So,
yeah.
Yeah, no, so we're right at the start of that journey. I've joined the estate, and kind of my role here as head of natural environment is to start to think about how do we protect, enhance the natural environment that we have, how do we start to bring it more to the fore of the identity of the estate, and then how do we start to bring it into the visitor attraction as well.
Of course.
So yeah,
yeah,
engage
yeah.
people.
Engage people in it, and so you have this opportunity for I guess the younger generations to really start to engage a little bit more with nature and the importance of the biodiversity and the
Absolutely.
abundance that we
Yeah.
need of the biodiversity.
And it's fascinating because here we stand here today, and there's house martins flying around. We've got real kind of diversity in the grass, etc. And the way we've stewarded the land and looked after it for the kind of history of the estate has been responsible, has been appropriate, but the kind of ramping up and that kind of conflict between human activities and kind of nature has just kind of been overlooked and is now coming into sharp focus really over the last kind of 10 years or so. So we're very much looking at how do we change our woodland plans, how do we change our farming plans, how do we change the way that we kind of look at conservation, and how do we start to get those all working together so that we can have a far better, more biodiverse landscape. So,
absolutely. Great. All right, so where are we off to next?
We're going to go down and get a bit closer to some of the kind of more traditional kind of components of the Castle Howell landscape, how it was designed. So we're going to go into some of the deer park where we've got some really amazing ancient veteran oak trees, and then we'll go on and have a look at some farmland as well.
Okay, great.
Yeah. This would have been part of the original deer park, for which you could just see the wall right in the far distance over there would go up behind this bank of trees. And actually that deer park would have wrapped all the way around the house and the grounds. And that deer park was lost, and it's kind of been broken up into different parts of kind of grassland and the arboretum and arable farming. But this is a nice area where it kind of gives a sense of those kind of the richness of that biodiversity that we have, and kind of an indication of how we want to kind of start to extend that
to extend it on. Yes, exactly. And again, just leaving, when trees are felled or they they sort of die and they collapse, I think, in the past we'd think we need to remove them, and now we've realized that leaving these dead trees is fantastic for
definitely.
Biodiversity and for the soil. And
so there's like unique saprotrophs, like saprophytic fungi that kind of live on breaking down material. There's ones that are totally unique to kind of breaking down oak and things like that. So the dying oak can be host to like thousands of different kind of bacteria, fungi. And here we've got some beautiful kind of parkland oaks. Some of these, well, most of them predate the house, so would be over kind of 300 years in age, and we've planted some additional ones around as well. But that kind of combination of trees, both blocks of areas of woodland, and we've got kind of mixtures of ancient woodland and kind of commercial forestry, and then areas where we're kind of spilling in and have these kind of wood pasture, wood meadow type areas as well. So yeah, that connection between kind of woodland and landscape and those different levels of vegetation are really valuable.
Really valuable, and it's about making sure that we just sort of let nature do its thing, do what it's good at, rather than competing against it and wanting to destroy it. It's about letting it thrive, because I always feel that if nature thrives, then we as the human race will continue to thrive as well. Well, where off to next?
We're going to carry on following this beck that's just a little stream right down the bottom of here. We're going to follow that down, we'll cut across it, and we'll go over to some of the farmland. Where we've got some regenerative farming trials, look at how we're changing systems, and then also look at some of the land that we're thinking about. How do we change that in a kind of dramatic way over time as well. So,
exactly. Okay, brilliant.
Perfect. So I thought we'd come out here both because it looks insane and absolutely amazing, the kind of bright red of the clover, the real crimson. But also because it kind of allows us to talk about how things are changing on the estate, how land management's changing. So from a farming perspective, this is an arable field. It may not look like it right now. And here we're trialling some cover crops. So non-commercial crops, if you want to say that way, which are part of the rotation and effectively fill that gap between harvest and sowing the next crop. So typically over winter, this crop, this cover crop, we've got a number of different blocks in here, so you can see by the different colours, has gone in after harvest last year and has now come through. So if we were continuing to crop, this would probably be grazed off or sprayed off, and then the next crop would go in. But for now, this field's in fallow for the year, so we're just kind of leaving it as is. And it's quite dramatic.
It's so dramatic. I mean, it's stunning. It's absolutely stunning just to see this, as you said, this bright sort of crimson color from the clover, but also dotted around, bits of a light purple.
You've got some vetch in there, and some Phacelia, which is really pretty. So if it was a sunny day, this would be swarming with bees.
Really wonderful. Wow, so exciting.
Yeah, so here you can see the mausoleum right up the hill. You can see the Black Angus herd beneath that. So we're on the kind of eastern edge of the estate here, and this is kind of the land over here is quite, well, it is wet. So we've got kind of land here which is pretty marginal for cropping. So this is some of the land that we're really looking about, actually how do we change and start to think about habitat creation here over time and take land out of production that is marginal, that needs a lot of energy to produce a crop. Actually, can we use it for better purposes?
And I think it's about finding that balance. It's not about taking all of the land out of sort of food production, if you like. It's looking at your land and saying, right, so this is marginal farmland, so I'm better off giving the land back to nature and allowing, if you like, sort of this increase in biodiversity, but also finding the balance and saying, right, but this part of the estate or the land is, you know, this is fantastic farmland, and we'll keep that. So we have, you still have this diverse system in one sense, that you've got the food production on the one hand, but also you've got this enjoyable wildflower field, or that, you know, that you can come in and visit as well and see as a visitor, but also somebody who's really concerned about climate change and biodiversity.
It's sequestering carbon, it's holding biodiversity, it's improving water quality, improving air quality.
Brilliant.
The kind of landscape that we see now is a really traditional one, hyper-traditional in this sense, or kind of historic, where we've got ridge and furrow systems in the field behind you. You can just see the kind of ridges of the kind of grass popping up. And then beyond that, we've got farmland, fairly marginal farmland, and then the kind of woodlands beyond. So we have a landscape that's pretty rich and pretty diverse, but are we using it in the most appropriate way? Can we build more diversity into that landscape? Can we start to look at different farming systems, different management systems? Can we kind of create areas where we're rewilding and kind of introducing various different species for grazing, and kind of starting to think about how that whole ecosystem is working and operating?
Yes.
Nature is messy, like, and we as humans like things in nice square boxes, nice square fields that could be really efficient. But here, like, to create kind of a blurring of that landscape where the woodlands kind of fall in and you can't really tell where the wood ends and the field starts. That's the ambition really here, is to kind of start to see kind of nature thriving in this area in front of us.
Well, fantastic. And I cannot wait to share some more of the nature restoration projects on the estates of the historic houses I'll be visiting throughout Britain.